So, granted, Donald Trump's campaign has used lies without any shame, without flinching or blinking, to mobilize and animate and energize its supporters on a daily basis, as easily and frequently as the rest of us breathe. But believe me when I tell you that this time it's different. Disinformation of a stripe and variety that goes well beyond the size of his crowds or his golf scores. A dangerous lie this time. We reported it for you yesterday. Trump's entirely false assertion that the Department of Justice authorized the FBI to use deadly force in its 2022 court-approved search of Mar-a-Lago. That lie has exploded. The campaign used it in a fundraising email suggesting that President Joe Biden was, quote, locked and loaded, ready to, quote, take him out on the day the court-approved search warrant was carried out. Then the Marjorie Taylor Greens and Paul Gosars of the world, Trump surrogates, augmented and amplified that lie, suggesting President Joe Biden had intended to assassinate Trump. And his allies in conservative media, what did they do? Well, watch.
This was an attempted assassination attempt on Donald John Trump.
Why was Merrick Garland prepping for a possible, shootout? Why did agents roll up, guns at the ready?
Maybe they wanted to come in without FBI, without, DOJ, without all of that, identifying so that they could engage in deadly physical force.
Deadly force. Does that mean that Joe Biden was authorizing the FBI to if it came to that and he resisted arrest, it would be okay to kill Donald Trump?
That's what it seems.
So I won't describe them all in one broad brush, but most of those people are smart enough to know that what they were saying was Bill Barr's favorite word, bullshit. Not all of them. And to believe any of this, you have to ignore the facts that are in front of our eyes. For instance, why would President Joe Biden put any such order on paper? Why would anybody do that? Wait for a specific moment when Trump was not at Mar-a-Lago and then just do that? Well, he wouldn't. Neither would the Department of Justice. Why would the Department of Justice use the same language in the search warrant for Mar-a-Lago executed by the FBI at President Joe Biden's home? Were they going to get him too, right? Get two for quite a summer. Did the president intend to assassinate himself or someone else there in his own house? The reality is different, and the FBI has already explained what the reality is. That this language is standard, it's boilerplate, it is the norm in going about executing a search warrant. But as always, Trump and his enablers are not interested in letting the facts, even when they could put the lives of law enforcement officials in America, they're not interested in those facts getting in the way of a dangerous new conspiracy theory spreading like wildfire. Joining our coverage, former assistant director for counterintelligence at the FBI, author of the soon-to-be-released book, Long Haul, Hunting the Highway Serial Killers, Frank Figliuzzi joins me and David and Bond. Frank, your thoughts?
I don't know whether to laugh or cry, but this is so gravely serious that it can't be treated as humor. We've lost a segment of our population that either is incapable or seems incapable of doing independent thought and their own research. But some of those people did their own research when it came to the pandemic, and they decided, some of them, to ingest fish tank cleanser because they thought it was an acceptable form of ivermectin. Look, the other group of people are people who absolutely know, as you said, they're smart enough to know that you can look this stuff up and it's verifiable, and yet they continue to shovel it into their followers' mouths, who swallow it whole. I have done countless ops orders, written them, approved them, been physically on search warrants and arrest warrant service, and I can tell you I can't recall seeing an ops order that did not include the deadly force policy. You know why? Because it's required. And if people were smart enough to look at the released document, the unsealed document from the court, you'd see in the bottom right corner a federal form, an FD form. There's a number there. That means this is a template that we use every single time. It does not change. And the part that stays in there is that deadly force policy. So I would ask some of the people who are saying, my God, why was this even necessary to restate it? Even if it's required, why would you do it? Because it's in every document. And because in my experience, when you send people in and say, this is low threat, low risk, no worries, somebody gets hurt. I can give you example after example, including examples where people got killed because they weren't vigilant on a seemingly routine search or arrest. Agents killed because they weren't vigilant and on what seemed like a routine situation. The fact that it's in the Biden consensual search, and I emphasize consensual, everybody was cooperating. You can't get lower risk than that, but yet the deadly force policy was in that too, because you don't take it out. And things happen. Murphy's Law happens all the time in law enforcement. Things go south on you quickly, often with people unrelated to the case. Some contractor shows up. The girlfriend shows up with a shotgun. Somebody does something unexpected. And God forbid, the FBI told those agents at Mar-a-Lago, hey, you know what, today, don't bring your guns. Don't bring them. And then someone gets killed. That's not the way it works.
You know, David Jolly, there's a lot of projection. And here we go, year 9 of covering Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is right now arguing before the United States Supreme Court. He has argued, he's waiting for a ruling on what he believes would be or should be absolute immunity to use SEAL Team 6 to assassinate, Trump's word, a political rival. The idea that anyone who typed and sent this thinks that there's any truth to the fact that anyone was trying to assassinate Trump is something I can't believe. I don't believe that they're that dumb. I mean, these people are a lot of things. Steve Bannon is a lot of things. I don't have enough time on the air to say them all. I do think if someone loved him a little bit more, he would do something about the look. But he's a lot of things. He's not stupid. And he knows damn well that nobody was trying to assassinate Donald Trump. But this is the kind of lie that's going to get the people that they view as their people killed. I mean, who do they think carries out? I mean, this is going to endanger the life of every man and woman in law enforcement who has to knock on a door, who I understand from law enforcement, that's some of the most dangerous, harrowing moments. Those are the moments that sometimes you call your family before. Those are the most dangerous moments in a workday that a lot of men and women in law enforcement face.
Yeah, Nicole, this is one of those moments where you can kind of see the fine line in Republican politics between the knowing, lying, bad actor manipulators, right? The Donald Trumps and Steve Bannons, and just the raw idiots like the Marjorie Taylor Greene and others who truly don't understand the facts of the case are just going to amplify this. But both of them, both of those lanes, the manipulators and the idiots, are both contributing to real danger in the United States because the imagery of this, the storytelling of this, excites people who then engage possibly in violence in response, right? This is nothing more than what Donald Trump said, go to the Capitol with strength, not weakness, because on January 6th, they only understand strength. Now when Donald Trump is saying, I'm a victim, they're coming for me because they're coming for you. And oh, by the way, they're coming for me with weapons, with a possible assassination. You better believe that that excites some of the most unstable. And that's where, you know, those like the Steve Bannons, I don't know what Donald Trump understands in his own head and heart, but the people who know better, the Sean Hannitys and some of those Fox News voices that you heard, they know that they are speaking to an audience that could be excited by this. It used to be a rule in politics that you de-escalate things. Part of leadership is settling things down, de-escalating. That is no longer the case when it comes to Trumpism in today's Republican Party. It's a dangerous moment, whether they're intending to do it or whether they're just raw idiots.
I'll let you take a pass on the idiots versus intentional breakdown and who falls on what side. But what's amazing is there's no one in law enforcement in the Trump coalition who came out and said, whoa, you know, to do exactly what David Jolly said, de-escalate.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, we had a man who went and entered the Speaker of the House's home and attacked her husband. And who knows what would have happened if she was the one inside of there. People carry out these acts. There's crazy people out there. And to steal from my producer colleague, Dan, on the road with me, the way that he puts it is there are those who would not pass the lie detector test. Those like Steve Bannon, those like Charlie Kirk and Benny Johnson and Sean Hannity. They know that what they're saying is a lie. They know it's false. They know that the FBI wasn't sent in to assassinate. But there's a great share, potentially millions, right, that would pass the lie detector test, that do truly believe that. And they are the ones that are then echoing those statements there. And when you talk about the potential of how these folks are viewing this, I can't even begin to explain the entanglement of conspiracy theories. There is a great number of folks who I've personally talked to who believes that Donald Trump is in control of the military, is going to take over the White House and get Joe Biden out of there.
As an ex-president.
As an ex-president. So when you hear that Joe Biden is using his forces, the FBI, to go and try to assassinate Donald Trump at his compound in Florida, this may be complex here, but this is real violent war type talk that we're talking about here. So to minimize it as just some lies, and the thing is, one other point, like Kimberly Guilfoyle, the wife of Don Jr., was just on her online show, literally in the last few minutes, spewing out this lie herself. So despite having, now 2 days of being able to reject this lie and correct it, they're not. They keep it going.